Good morning. We'll call to order the Board of Trustees meeting for the Utah Transit Authority on today, Wednesday, February the 20th. If you'd stand and join me in repeating the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll have next our Safety First Minute with Jonathan Yip.
Point of order. Just press the button on the microphone, please. Thank you.
There you go.
Okay, good.
There you go.
All right, my name is Jonathan Yip. I'm the Senior Manager of Operations Analysis and Solutions. I'm here acting on behalf of Dave Garris, Chief Safety, Security, and Technology, to deliver the Safety Minutes for today. I would like to take the opportunity to share with you a very quick short story from a Timpanogos operator. So, operator Paul Thomas was traveling southbound on State Street, approaching the 1200 North intersection on a green traffic signal. A northbound vehicle failed to yield the right-of-way to the bus and attempted to make a left turn onto 1200 North. Operator Thomas did a fantastic job of scanning ahead, identifying the other vehicle's action, and taking controlled evasive action to avoid assured collisions. So I just want to share that story, and there are also a couple other operators from the Ogden business units. Operator Richard Stewart and Operator Chris King, they are all demonstrating this kind of behaviors. There are 1,000 of these operators who are driving and delivering service for us every day to the customers and public, and just want to let you know that they are the integral part in shaping the safety culture we have in UTA. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan. Next, we'll go to our public comment section. And Bob, we have some folks with us today.
We do. We had one online comment. It was from George Chapman. The comment was, only one transfer 220 is on 100 South at Harmon's. 10 times more transfers are around the block. Why ride mass transit if buses actually make you miss transfers? We have someone in the audience who'd like to speak, Abby Osborne.
Great. Abby? Just ask you to push the button on the mic base.
Very much my time of year this year.
I bet it is. Thank you for taking the
Mr. Chair, I'm Abby with the Chamber. How are you?
Good.
This is what I do with the legislature every day. So thank you for an opportunity to be here and to come to comment about the Clear the Air Challenge, which I all know everyone in the audience is taking part of. This is our 10th year, if you didn't know this. This is 10-year Clear the Air Challenge. Only the second year in February. So last year we moved from a July challenge to a February challenge because of the ozone versus the inversion season, and it's been tremendously successful. This year we have more people involved, more teams involved in the challenge than we've ever had, and more new businesses than we've ever seen. It's been unprecedented. We have a great partnership, obviously, with you all here at UTA, but with UCare and UDOT TravelWise is our partners. Overall, the challenge results as of the 10-year challenge, 1 million, just over 1 million trips saved, 15 million miles saved, 15 million miles saved, 5,000 tons of CO2 reduced, over $7 million saved in gasoline costs. The 2019 challenge so far, so we're only 20 days into it, 19 days into it, I guess we didn't count today, about 40,000 trips saved, 567,000 miles saved, 161 tons of CO2 saved, just over $200,000 saved, and 800,000 calories burned. Right? And approximately 2,000 participants on a daily basis. We have about 20,000 participants total, and about 2,000 participate on the daily. So it's a really good year. It's a good challenge. We've had great weather, obviously, to not get us in too much of the inversion time, but good snowpack. But we really appreciate everything that UTA does to support the Clear the Air Challenge and support our participants actually being able to take the challenge. This is great reduction, great use of, we all know that everyone has to do their part in order for us to sustain air quality. And this is just a little way that those of us that are taking the challenge can participate on a monthly basis. So thank you very much for everything that you do at UTA.
Thank you, Abby. And we appreciate our partnership with the Chamber. They certainly have led out on this, and it's been a great partnership going forward. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Happy to answer any questions if anyone has any, but
I'd look to my colleagues if they do.
I had a quick question, Abby. I love the statistic about the calories. Is that new? Is
It
that
is-
new this year?
It is brand new. So I don't know, all of you are maybe using the new app that we have, and it actually will tell you how many calories you burn because you can put in walked, to lunch or walk to work, bike to work, and it will tell you how many calories based on just the phone knowing where you're at. So it's definitely a new feature, and it's one that's pretty popular. I love it because it's great to know.
And just to say, that, what's the app's name again? Clear the Air Challenge? No. Okay. Sorry. No worries. I just thought it'd be good to let everyone know.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it's Commuter Tracker. Thanks, Matt. And it has two little, a dark blue and a light blue kind of silhouettes of emoji people. But you can you log in, put everything in there, what team you're involved in, and then every day you just go ahead and count your miles saved or your skip trips or however you commuted.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you, Abby. Bob, were there any others?
No other comments.
Okay, great. We'll go to item number 5 on our agenda, which is approval of our minutes from February the 13th. I'll entertain a motion to that end.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we approve the February 13 minutes as.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion to it?
Point of order, Chair. We need microphones on.
Oh, sorry. So do you want to just restate your motion? Just
Okay, I move that we approve the February 13 board minutes as submitted.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. We're on to item number 6, and I understand we have the real-life physical cutout of Steve Meyer here with us today, so it's very reflective
lifelike.
of the actual person.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
it's nice to have you here, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. I've been doing my trip reduction down in Arizona. I've been very successful and burning a lot of calories on the bike trails. So it's been great. Just a couple of things, reminders. Transit Day on the Hill rescheduled for tomorrow, the 21st. We'll have several buses on display as well as several of our Board of Trustees on display up there at about 11 o'clock tomorrow. There'll be an announcement this afternoon of an event that we're staging with some partners to help with the Clean Air Challenge. And I'm not going to tease that anymore, but about 1:15 this afternoon. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions for Steve at this point? Okay. We'll next go to our December 2018 financial report and go to Bob Biles, who present that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This dashboard will look familiar. We'll be back with you next week to talk about changes that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. As far as sales tax, we'll receive our December one, hopefully later this week. We'll be able to report to you how 2018 actually turned out on sales tax. We're ahead of budget still, and the question will be, will we hit the 6.9% growth that we've projected for 2018? As far as fare revenue, we are above budget. We're just slightly below last year's collections, which when you think about ridership, we're down about 2% on ridership, but our revenue is held steady. That's the good work of Monica and many others in the organization, keeping that as high as possible. On operating expense, and I should note these are preliminary numbers, because we were looking at one of the year-end accrual entries that we will go back and take a look at. You notice that's narrowed from last month, about a $4 million favorable variance to about $1 million. And so we're making sure we've got all that correct. And, there's still payables coming in, and, final will be available after the audit.
So Bob, that shows a red, but I look at it and it says under budget. Am I missing something?
So it's unfavorable for the month of December.
Oh, for the
because
month
of those
December.
accruals. But if you look year to date,
I see where
it's yellow.
Okay.
It's still below budget, so it's favorable, but not as favorable as we had thought it was going to be.
Okay.
Again, we had year-end accruals, sick leave, vacation, a little bit over $3 million. That's done in December. We're having discussions internally. Is that something we should do on a more regular basis?
Yeah.
So we don't have this one-time charge in December.
December jumps out of whack.
Yeah, December is usually it's higher. It's about 10% of the budget because you have that tail. You're throwing things that typically lag a month for invoices. You're just putting those back into the fiscal year. So that's not unusual. It's fairly typical. As far as the diesel price, $1.89 in December. So we ended up the year at $2.40 versus $2.20. And again, January was, I believe, $1.80. So good start for the year. Ridership we talked about, we were down about 900,000 for the year. Take a look at sales tax. These went down quite a bit in the last month. Salt Lake in particular was lower than the prior year by about 2.5%. So we're anxious to see what happens in December. I looked at those trends. Usually when Salt Lake is lower than the year before, the next month has jumped up quite a bit. We'll see. We don't know how much the federal shutdown might affect our December sales. So we'll see. Again, we had forecasted about a 6.9% growth for the year over the prior year, and we're sitting it right at 6.4%.
Do you go back to, or do you make an accrual estimate on that, or do you just record it in the month it's actually received?
So we do accruals in the financial statements. What we present here is the actual collections.
Okay.
And so even on the dashboard, you'll notice that it says November 18. So we've always reported, here's what's actually come in.
Okay.
Whereas in the financial statements, you'll see the accruals.
Do an accrual. Okay.
As far as expense by mode, some variance here. Commuter rail, no real surprise there that it's negative. We've talked about fuel. That's about $800,000 of that unfavorable variance. And then parts is almost $1 million. It's part of our continual work to keep the system operating in a safe manner. On operations support, most of that's public safety, about $600,000 of that. On the administration part of that, it's just various departments that came in under budget. The largest was the general manager, or the executive director now, a little bit over $1 million, and the board actually was $500,000 under budget also. Other key ones, paratransit, that's mainly mobility management, about $1 million. Maintenance of right-of-way is propulsion power, the electricity to run the track system. That was about $1.4 million of that number. And we also look at it by type of expense. Wages and benefits, we came out about even. Again, we're looking at that accrual. I'm hopeful that when we look at that accrual, we'll edge over onto the positive side. As far as services, $1.8 million of that was professional and technical. That also comes into play when you look at the other, the expense transfer. We charge expense to our budgets and then send it over to capital funds. So we were under on our professional technical. We were also under on our transfer to the expense. And so those offset each other. On the utilities, again, mainly propulsion power. And fuel, we talked about that. Diesel, about $1.7 million of that makes up that $1.6 million. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about the December financials. Just a reminder, these are preliminary numbers. We will continue to have invoices come in. If they're material, we'll make sure they get recorded. And then we've got the sales tax that will be coming in. And then the auditors will come in. And once the auditors have reviewed the financials, we'll provide you with the final numbers.
And roughly you'll accrue, I mean, at what point do you sort of cut off items?
Well, we did a preliminary cutoff February 7th.
Okay.
But yeah, we have to pay attention if there's a large item
Something
that
large,
comes through.
yeah.
We still need to go back and record it.
Okay. Any questions on these, Beth?
Bob, I had a question in regards to the parts and warranty recovery. Is that in essence the same type of category, or is it parts totally separate and warranty recovery?
Yeah, those are really two separate things.
Okay.
So we were over about $700,000 on parts, but we were able to, through our warranty recovery, actually exceed what we'd budgeted. So we recovered more than we had forecast, about $400,000. So those two offset.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Seeing no other questions, I'll look to a motion to approve the financial report for December of 2018.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the financial reports for December 2018.
I'll second that motion.
Have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you, Bob. Our next item before us is a resolution authorizing the execution of an interlocal agreement with Salt Lake City for a transit master plan implementation. And Nicole Bordeaux and Laura Hansen. And I got a text message last night that things seem to be on track.
I also would like Lauren and Bart to join me if that's okay, Chair.
Sure. No, we'd be happy to have them both come forward. Lauren Simpson, our general manager for our Salt Lake bus operations, and then Bart Simmons, who sadly, I think, Bart, this is your last week, right?
That's correct.
But thank you for your great service to UTA.
I think I'm pulling them both out of their comfort zone. But today we are excited to talk about something that we've worked on for a long time at this agency and along with Salt Lake City. I'm going to take a minute and just give some context and then turn it over to Laura to review some of the information we did before, and then we'll all be available for questions after if you have some questions. Also, I'd like to just acknowledge that we have our partners here from Salt Lake City with us. Sitting in the audience, Julia and John and Jen McGrath, two of which they're former UTA employees. So it's really exciting for both of us to all of us to see how this happens. So
we're excited about this opportunity.
So just to give some context, back in 2014, I know that sounds like a lifetime ago, Salt Lake City Council started talking about needing more bus service. And what they really wanted was local bus service, connectivity, and thinking they could possibly provide that for themselves. And Chair, I'm sure you kind of remember some of these conversations.
I got out of there before they got into them, too.
So UTA is a great provider of service, and I want to acknowledge Matt Sybil and Robin Hutchins, who are no longer, Robin's no longer with Salt Lake City, but Matt and her worked together on a transit master plan. And this transit master plan really laid the foundation for what we're doing today. They looked at how we could partner as a team, making sure that we can meet the city's goals as well as provide a regional service, which can be difficult in the situation and all the things that we're trying to balance. So thank you, Matt. I'm glad you started this process with them. That partnership now has led to where we are today with the Salt Lake City interlocal agreement. And over the last few years, we've been negotiating and working with them to say you don't need to run your own bus service, but what does it take financially and what does it take on our end to provide the service that you're looking for? So last night, Salt Lake City Council took the resolution and adopted a 20-year agreement with UTA partnership to look at providing service in phases. Today we'll talk about what the first phase is and the addendum we're doing, but on the larger picture, it's to what's really great is to see a partnership a relationship that wasn't developed a few years ago to one that is so solidified and looking to give both our riders, our community, what they need and what they deserve. It was really exciting for us that they talked about highlighting our partnership, highlighting the hard work of our staff, and highlighting how appreciative they are and excited to get this launched. And also, we've already begun talking about the next phase, and Laura will show you that. So today, we're going to talk about the ILA, the 20-year agreement, and then the mobilization cost to get that started. And then we'll come back also with other appropriations in the phasing of this process. The last thing I would just say is it took a lot of people to get this going, and I appreciate, that's why I asked Bart, that's why I asked Lauren, and all of their staff from the business unit to planning staff to be here with us, because this is new, it's difficult, we didn't know where to start, but everybody was willing to make it work. So if you have questions, we have a ton of experts on certain topics. I'm going to turn the time over to Laura now to talk about any deal points, Chair.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Nicole, for that great introduction, and to everybody here who's supported the development of this agreement and this master plan. We started out with Salt Lake City with this master plan. They just adopted. Our staff participated heavily in the development of it. Nicole gave some context on that. And the master plan really included a handful of key components, key goals. One was implement a frequent transit network. And the idea behind that was to have a series of key corridors for bus service, primarily serving residents of the city, that started really early in the morning. They ran late at night. It was 7 days a week. It was frequent. The ability for people to make lifestyle choices based on the predictability of this transit service. So that was a key component of the master plan. The other was to develop alternative service modes. So this is an idea like a microtransit, Uber, Lyft, trips to transit or trips to work. So the ability to serve some of the areas more effectively than we can with a 40-foot bus. So that's a component piece of this master plan. Enhanced bus corridors, that's new amenities, nice stations, maybe off-board fare collection, and improved transit access and affordability were the key goals of that master plan. So we worked with the city through this, and I'm actually going to skip to the end of my slideshow and then come back and work backwards on this. But so we are here today to talk about an agreement that is a 20-year vision. We've structured it around a master interlocal agreement that kind of outlines the rules, the structure and framework of our partnership, how we calculate the cost of service, and then some addenda, I guess is plural, that outline the specific financial components according to each level of service that we're adding. So what we're considering today is the master interlocal agreement and the first addendum, which is a mobilization charge, allowing us to hire operators, start training them, training mechanics, procuring buses, all of the things that we need to do in order to get ready to provide the service in August. Coming later this year will be the addendum for the actual service that's starting August of 2019. We can't adopt that today because we're waiting for the next fiscal year cycle for the Salt Lake City Council, but that's provided there for you so you can take a look at it. So this is what we're working on today. The city's master plan, you can see every orange line on this map is a frequent transit network that's been identified in the master plan. The blue lines and yellow lines represent our existing bus and rail service. So you can see how they line up. We're already serving a lot of these corridors, but there's some refinements that we're not currently serving. So today, this is kind of the first vision of what the first phases of this partnership might look like. The red lines are 2nd South, 9th South, and 21st South. The green lines represent 10th North, 6th North, some elements of South Temple, and then 4th South and Foothill Boulevard as well. And the city council's main focus, as they were directing their staff and us to work on what this first phase might look like, were to focus on connections between the west and the east sides of the city, connecting all 4 kind of corners of the city, providing good access throughout, and really focusing on better serving the residents of the west side of Salt Lake City that attend high school at East and Highland High, which is located on the kind of the other side of the freeway and have not had great transit service. And so that was really the focus of our initial goal. The mobilization addendum that we're looking at today and the service increases that are scheduled to start in August of 2019, pending approval of both boards, would be 2nd South, 9th South, and 21st South. The service on these would start at 5 a.m. and run until midnight, Monday through Saturday. On Sunday, it would run from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Every 30 minutes. Monday through Saturday would be every 15 minutes. And really, this is a tremendous increase in service. Right now on 9th South, I think we calculated this is a 413% increase in service on that corridor. Really doing a great job to connect the community.
It's also a 4% increase to our bus service overall. So that's just the first phase. This is a huge access opportunity for us as well. I do want to say, Laura, that this first phase that you'll see, the mobilization is about $2 million. And then the actual service cost is about 5.3. So you'll see that in your packet, but I think it's important to see what you'll be looking at as far as costs coming up.
I asked you a question while you're on this slide,
sure, yeah.
And maybe somebody from Salt Lake City needs to. How do you sort of estimate? I mean, it's sort of intrinsic that if you have more frequent service, you'll get more riders, and I think we have other statistics show that. But is there another measurement in which they sort of estimate that they'll get this ridership as these additional service opportunities come about? And I mean, that area is growing immensely, so it seems like a no-brainer. But I just wondered if we have something other than really smart people's hunches.
Yeah, and Lauren may be able to speak to this a little bit as well. It really takes about 2 years for a bus route to mature. So when we start the service, we may not see immediate huge ridership gains. That will happen over time as people realize that the service is there and they can count on it. There are a variety of performance metrics that are in the interlocal agreement as well as the master plan, and those are access to opportunity, the number of additional jobs and educational opportunities that people can reach. Are we stimulating land use changes and economic development around these corridors? And so there's a lot of different things that we're measuring with these routes beyond just ridership.
As well as air quality.
As well as air quality, yeah, exactly, yeah. Especially during our Clean Air Month, yes.
I think Beth had a question.
Laura, I appreciate what you're talking about in terms of the metrics and the overall increase in having maybe land use changes overall. Is that how this was designed initially for Salt Lake City? Is that kind of what they were thinking, in addition, of course, to the air quality, but also the level of commitment, I guess, is, I think, another factor in this. So did you want to talk about that a little bit, if that's what Salt Lake City is intending? And
sure. I can talk about the history of that. So prior to this, they adopted the transit master plan. Along with that, they adopted zoning that improved transit corridors. And so I think it's both of our relationship as they make the adoptions for the planning in those corridors. I think that is an expectation of development and seeing how this frequent network gives that access. So they did some initial zoning to allow for some of the development, and then we'll also look to the future to make sure that that's supporting the transit ridership and development.
That's great. Yeah.
I have a question as well. 21st South is already serviced by a number of bus routes. Is this in addition to, or will those be changed as well?
Yeah, I can have Lauren respond to this as well. But so both 2nd South and 21st South are pretty well served with transit already, but our service starts later in the morning and it ends early in the evening, and it's less frequent on the weekends. And so really what the city's investment is expanding those hours of service and days of the week. And so it was the same route, but it's just increased service on that same route.
But will the current bus routes be curtailed as a result of the more frequent service by this new route?
It's actually the same route. So nothing's being replaced or eliminated. We're just adding hours to the existing bus routes. So but there is some straightening and a little bit of realignment of the corridors, but really it's just adding more. So it's
more
all
frequent
above
service,
and beyond.
longer.
Yep, above and beyond what's there already, and nothing's being eliminated. Yes. So we went over this in fairly good detail last time we met with you all, but the agreement itself, and you can refer to the text there, but the key pieces are that every single year we will be approving an addendum. It will be an annual addendum that allocates the funding, gives us an opportunity to take a look at the service and say, do we need to make some adjustments? Is it still meeting our objectives? Is it meeting the performance metrics that we've identified together? Do we want to add something more, or do we want to reallocate that service to a different corridor, for example? So every single year we'll be approving this. And in the structure, we created a fairly complex calculator to calculate the cost of the sponsored service. And I think the highlight there is that there are lots of opportunities within this annual revisiting to adjust all of the various different variable factors that may change both UTA's risk and Salt Lake City's risk. So fuel costs may go up, for example, or maybe we're moving to a different kind of vehicle that is much more fuel efficient, but now we're charging for electricity rather than diesel gasoline. Maybe the interest rate for leasing vehicles has gone up or down dramatically. Maybe the paratransit costs, once we add more and more service, maybe the percentage of impact of the new service on paratransit obligations goes down. So we have an opportunity to adjust those every single year and make sure that it's a fair deal for both UTA and for Salt Lake City. We think this is a great structure that's going to really set us up for a multi-year partnership, and that we have lots of opportunity to add and subtract from that as it meets our individual needs.
Laura, I just had a quick question on that. You just mentioned earlier that usually it takes about 2 years for a bus service to be seasoned, I guess, I can't remember the term you used. So in that first year, in the first part of this contract, so in the beginning, are we going to take that into account? How would that look for the first full year moving on?
We'll be tracking that data from the beginning and all the way through. We, I think, have an agreement with Salt Lake City, or a general understanding that we recognize that we need to make a pretty good investment and leave these here for a couple of years before we're really going to see ridership changes. But that's part of the reason that we're tracking these other metrics as well: increased access to opportunity, and some of the land use changes that accompany that. I think everyone recognizes that it takes some time for these changes to happen, but we will start tracking the data. We'll review it every year. We've got a great partnership and reporting mechanism built into the agreement, where we're sharing information back and forth with one another, and we'll meet every year and discuss that. I don't think anyone anticipates that if we don't have great ridership, that all of a sudden we're just going to pull it away after the first year. I think everyone's under that understanding that it will take some time.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Along those lines, how are we getting that information? And maybe this is a Salt Lake City question, but how are we going to, once this is fully implemented, get that information to those riders on those key areas, 9th, 2nd, and 21st?
So we actually have in the agreement additionally is a marketing and communication agreement, and along with Salt Lake City, we will both be marketing and communicating that. That's our next meeting, and our next tackle is August Change Day and how we're communicating that. Salt Lake City just did a kind of dry run, and thank you for participating on working with that neighborhood about the 9 line specifically because it's the longest and it's a little new. So that we'll be partnering through branding, marketing, communications over the next few months to see how we both can leverage our opportunity there.
Question for you. So after a couple of years, and if for some reason it doesn't go great, I mean, does Salt Lake City have the luxury of saying, maybe this wasn't such a good idea, let's do it over here, or move it to this route? And I mean, do we care, or what's the mechanism sort of to get to that? Or are they just making such a commitment to future developers that they're going to just kind of stay in that area, those routes regardless?
I think initially when we started this agreement at UTA, it was also to talk about this core route and conversation of developers, communities, everybody can count on these frequent lines. So I think what we're trying to do as a partnership is say, the 9 line now is going to be this frequent. We're going to give you, some consistency in that. If it hits, we're thinking if it hits a threshold that would make it something that we need to provide, then Salt Lake City can move that funding to another to build up. But these corridors are looked at as main corridors through the city for long-term, for those zoning purposes, for that development, and for consistency of ridership and bringing communities together. I'm sure, and that's why we put this in the mechanism. If something were to be completely different, we have a way to negotiate together using our propensity and productivity. So we have a baseline that we're looking at that's a calculation that we agree to and they agree to, but it was more of looking at how do we expand it in more areas than actually take a corridor away.
I do, Lauren, question for you. Obviously, you have maintenance folks who work, I think, nearly around the clock, if not around the clock.
We do.
So that part works. And we know from personal experience that you're there early.
That's right. So, and you were there early as well. Thank you.
Took me a week to recover from waking up that early. So I gained a great appreciation for the operators. How much of your operations are going to have to change, or are you sort of there anyway, and this is just adding personnel and buses, and that's not a huge deal, or are you really going to have to scramble between now and August?
That's a good question. So on weekdays, we're there anyway. It will mean staying a little later, in the evening. Right now, our operations turns off the lights for about an hour and a half. We may only turn the lights off for about a half hour now. Maintenance is there 24/7. It's the weekends that will be, a little bit earlier, a little bit later. But that we kind of take that in stride. That's the nature of what we do. The biggest challenge will be in preparing for this and hiring the staff we need, particularly operators in this economy, to be ready for that. And so we're excited about this partnership, the idea. And we have much work ahead of us that we're busy making plans and working towards actually implementing it now. But it will have a modest impact in terms of our hours. It will have a moderate impact in terms of our staffing, in terms of numbers.
Okay. Good. I didn't know if you had anything else, or I can go to questions from board members if they have any.
I do have a quick question. So structurally, and this is just what occurred to me when you were making your comment, Lauren, some of our bus service, I guess I should say, not all or a lot, but some of it is detailed and established because it's accessing either tracks or front runner. And on Sundays, obviously, front runner doesn't run. Does that mean that changes? How do those bus routes look on a Sunday versus the rest of the week?
That's a good question. You're right. So FrontRunner doesn't run on Sundays. So we, with our service planning group, Laura's group, have worked to make sure those east-west connections are as good as we can make them on Sunday, connecting with tracks where they intersect with tracks. And of course, on weekdays, there is that connection. And so that's a constant effort we have to make sure that we're making good connections where the connections are needed.
Are you anticipating a lot of that is just locally destined ridership?
Exactly.
Yeah. That's kind of the primary focus was to look at local destinations, local connections on these first phases. When we look to working on service plans, and I'll leave this to Laura and Lauren when I'm gone, but when you look to the Salt Lake County piece, that's where you look at those regional connections and FrontRunner and tracks. And that's the more north-south connections and how do they kind of stack on top of on the local service that Salt Lake City is looking to enhance. So.
Yeah.
As I recall some of the discussions, we talked about partnering with the employers that are based along these high density areas. What type of an outreach connection are we making with those, and are we going to be able to maybe not track it, but understand kind of what their needs are looking at to be as well?
So along with the ILA, there's also Salt Lake City, and Salt Lake City's council is looking at their Hive Pass and our program that we work together along with other fare opportunities. So the last discussion that we sat in their work session was how do we work with UTA to really incentivize not only businesses but developers and also residents to use the service, and that's like a pass in every hand. So one of the great things about that partnership is the transportation department and the city council has also put money towards that. So they put money not only towards the service, but towards the marketing and also towards a pass program. So they'll begin those negotiations with Monica and how we link those all together to make sure that the Hive Pass program that they have now is at its highest, and they're looking to hire a consultant to look at what is the best kind of process we can work together to get to increasing that ridership and providing passes.
Not to let you off the hook, Bart, what's the end date on this agreement? Obviously, there's no funding clauses that both sides would have expected, but what kind of a term are we looking at?
So the other folks at the table are the ones that focus on the positive. I'm the one that looks at the parade of horribles. I'm kind of the grand marshal of the parade of horribles, if you will. It's a 20-year term, which was designed to be coterminous with the Transit Master Plan. We both realized that in a worst-case scenario, we would need off-ramps. We have a termination for convenience clause that's tied to a one-year trigger, which ultimately would be the worst-case scenario remedy that would allow us to kind of start over. I think the more effective tool would be that if one party got in a position where the assumptions had worked against them in a way that no longer made this economic, it forces us to sit at the table and continue the partnership that we've had so far and rework the deal so that we'll continue to work for both parties. I think more importantly, and it's what you hit on, Mr. Chair, is that this has to be funded every year. And I think that process of appropriation combined with the process that we have of looking at the Transit Master Plan goals that we jointly developed and all of our data is going to keep us aligned in making sure this program continues to work for both of us. That's kind of the vision we had when we were putting this together.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's, I think, helpful to know going into it. One question I have for you, Laura, we had the pleasure of meeting with a couple elected officials yesterday, and they had this question of which comes first, the route alignment versus or the ridership, and we have historical practices, and will we learn some things from this that will help us later on as we go through the rest of the larger planning process.
I sure hope so. I think that's the goal. That this is new, right? We have not really done this before. We've learned a lot through this process. I think everybody who's been engaged in it has had moments of extreme frustration and extreme, like, oh my goodness, we're making great progress. We will not have gotten it right the first time, I'm certain. We'll probably have to come back in a few years and maybe make some tweaks. But I think this is a learning opportunity for us, both in what does increased service do to ridership and to our service? How does that affect our riders? And then we'll also learn how to better negotiate these types of agreements in the future. I think that's a really exciting thing about this, is that it creates a framework for us to work with moving forward in the future. We'll be developing our 5-year service plan. If a community sees that and it's not the level of service that they want in their community, we now have a mechanism for them to be able to say, you know what, we want something a little bit more. We can put some skin in the game and we can work together to make this happen. And I think this is a great pilot for that.
Steve, did you have again, please?
Yeah, a couple of questions on the finances. You said that there's a $2 million startup cost. Who pays that?
So today, as part of Addendum 1, that is Salt Lake City. So they've appropriated that money already for the startup. And then we will come back.
They will pay that to us?
To us. And that will go into starting the hiring and the administrative cost around getting the service started, bus leasing, things like that.
Okay, so we will have to increase the number of buses.
Yes.
Certainly operators to run the extended hours.
Yes.
And then the $5 million
service
annual
implementation.
Right.
Correct.
Who pays that?
Salt Lake City will pay that to us.
Every year?
Every year.
For 20 years?
For 20 years, if that's the level. But there is an appropriation each year with their budget that they would do that. I would say that they're looking at it in phases, not necessarily years. So we would start this first phase with these 3 and then additional 6 North and 10th North, which would range from anywhere from 5.3 million to about 9, depending on the fluctuations in salaries and things to that matter.
And that is the map or that we're in green.
Yes. So that is their first phase. Part of it's funded, part of it's unfunded, in the sense that this council has nodded to make sure that they do the 5.3 million.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
It will also eliminate any excuse I have to not use buses.
It's probably right by your house.
Now, was there any planning for that?
Wasn't for me. It'll be a good thing, however. Yeah, I think it had more to do with him. Steve, did you have a comment? You looked like
Yes,
you had your...
thank you. Chair, I'd just like to congratulate the team on both sides, Salt Lake City and UTA. That you can see how this project touches every aspect of UTA. We're going to coordinate with the rail. The people office is going to spend a lot of effort hiring. Marketing is going to do their work. All the rest. And what Laura mentioned about this being a framework that gives just a great mechanism. It's got standardized numbers that we push up and get posted nationally, the National Transit Database. So that's kind of the basis for how we look at what our costs are. So it's a standardized number that should give comfort to other communities who look at this and want to sign up for a similar type of program. This is, it's open to anybody who wants to look at those numbers and see how they came about. And I'm really excited about, the flexibility allows us to true up. We're sharing some of the risks at, I think, an appropriate level, but it gives us the opportunity in future years to continue to look at that. And this opportunity for other communities who want to come in, counties or cities, can look at this and say, this is a great program. It's an opportunity for them to focus on some of these key routes, key corridors where they think the transit supportive development can occur, and where we can make those transportation and land use decisions as communities to increase transit use and increase the viability of our communities. Well,
thanks, Steve. Thanks to you as well for your efforts there. If Is there no other questions or other discussion items? And I certainly echo your comments, Steve. Thank you. Would entertain a motion on this particular resolution.
Mr. Chair, I would like to make sure my microphone turned on. Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we authorize R 2019-02-02, authorizing execution of the interlocal agreement with Salt Lake City for the Transit Master Plan implementation.
I'll second that motion.
I have a motion and a second. We'll go to roll call.
Trustee Holbrook.
Aye.
Trustee Millington.
Aye.
Chair Christensen.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, and congratulations, and thank you to our Salt Lake City partners for your future. Yeah, please give the whole group a round of applause.
Could I just ask all those that have been involved in behind the scenes? It's you asked about the effort.
Yeah.
There's been an immense effort behind the scenes, and those that have been involved, Salt Lake and UTA, it'd be nice if you just raise your hand and be recognized.
Yeah.
Or stand up.
Or stand up.
Yeah.
Let's stand up.
Here's the smart people. Thank you. Thank you, Lauren. We'll look forward with great anticipation. Next item 9, and we know some may need to excuse themselves, but we appreciate you being here. On contracts, disbursements, and change orders. And the first item is a revenue contract with Fidelity Investments. Monica?
Good morning. I'm bringing 2 contracts to you today. The first one is with Fidelity Investments. The amount of this contract is $648,000. They provide passes to all of their employees. They pay for it 100%. And so we're recommending that we go ahead and move them forward. They are renewing their contract, so they have been a past partner in the past. They've added some employees, about 200 employees just this year, so their numbers have increased in revenue over last year.
Monica, just really quick, how long have they been involved with the EcoPass program?
Several years, at least 6 off the top of my head. It could be longer, but they're a great partner.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah, it's been 6 years. And because I have a son that works for Fidelity and rides the front runner with me every morning at 7 o'clock.
That's great.
I will make a motion that we approve this contract with Fidelity Investments.
Perfect, thank you.
I will second.
A motion and a second for family unity.
Yes,
and
please.
for this contract. And
I can report that to him.
Yes, great.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Point of order, we need to do roll call
Oh,
vote.
excuse me. We'll go to roll call. Thank you for correcting.
Trustee Millington.
Aye.
Trustee Holbrook.
Aye.
Chair Christensen.
Aye.
Thank you. It's unanimous.
Thanks for that. Next item on is the Salt Lake County EcoPass.
So Salt Lake County also has an EcoPass program with us. They started it the fall of last year. They are a relatively new pass partner. They also pay for passes for their employees. The only difference between these 2 contracts is they're not giving a pass to 100% of their employees. They're paying for select employees. This contract is $248,000, and this is part of our standard EcoPass programs.
And if I remember right from my old job, this is a recent conversion from a different pass, but the employees seem much more excited about this version of it.
Yeah, I don't recall off the top of my head what program they were on before or what they were participating in. I think it was a reimbursement.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you for working with them. They were all pretty excited about that change.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the revenue contract with the Salt Lake City EcoPass program.
Salt Lake County.
Salt Lake County, sorry. Thank you.
I'll second that motion.
I have a motion and a second. We'll go to roll call.
Trustee Holbrook.
Aye.
Trustee Millington.
Aye.
Chair Christensen.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Monica.
Thanks, Monica.
Next are our discussion items, and I saw Matt here. Do you have a government relations update? Okay.
Thank you. Trustees, Matt Sybil, just briefly, you'll either be saddened or happy by this, but we're exactly halfway through the 45-day session. Let me, before I briefly talk about two of the bills that we're mainly focused on, actually, I think Steve already outlined Transit Day on the Hill, so I won't hit that anymore. We probably actually won't get Suntran to come up. We're planning on coming up from St. George. There's a foot of snow that's been forecasted. They don't quite know what to do with such an event. So the two main bills we're focused on are SB 72, which is the Transportation Governance and Funding revisions. That's Senator Harper is a sponsor of that. And on the House side, it's Representative Christopherson. We've talked about that bill before. It is, it's in a good place fundamentally. I think we're supportive of this, of most of what's in there. It's mostly related to some fixes from last year's transportation governance bill. And then also it really clarifies how our local partners, cities and counties, utilize local option sales tax. So that doesn't affect us. We want to make sure that we're kept whole on our portion of local option sales tax. There are a couple technical issues that we're working through with the sponsors, but I think overall we're in a sound place with that bill. It's on the second reading calendar of the Senate right now, so it's we hear that there may be a second substitute of that out. We're trying to find out some more details on that. So that's one of the main bills we're tracking. The other one is SB 34, the Affordable Housing Amendments by Senator Anderegg and Representative Potter. By the way, that bill, which really changes the dimensions for us as an agency in terms of how cities think of transit to help them shape where they put things like affordable housing. What parts of the cities do those things make sense? How can they be shaped by our transit system? You just heard an update, and of course, there's an agreement between us and Salt Lake City. Those types of bus routes, whether we call them core routes or routes that have interlocal agreements, those are in this bill, SB 34, in addition to rail and BRT, as corridors that cities can utilize and count on in terms of where they shape affordable housing in their communities. So these are real things happening in real time, which are really neat. That bill has been through a few iterations. It's on its third substitute right now. This afternoon, that's scheduled to be discussed in the House Economic Development and Workforce Services Committee. Has a long history. We've been involved for a couple of years, most notably with the Legislative Commission on Housing Affordability. So that's just a quick update on those two bills. Maybe I'll pause there and before I talk about appropriations.
I mean, we should, I mean, we could or maybe should take a position on that particular bill. And I know we're not actually slated for a vote, but it is kind of a government relations discussion item. How valuable, I guess, is sort of supporting that bill to the sponsor? Is that something that they would want? Obviously, we're interested and supportive of it.
I believe that that's a very meaningful thing for UTA to do. And, you know, with the direction of the board, we could reflect that in the hearing this afternoon. They're often looking for partners and entities who have been supportive to take formal actions on these types of things. The League of Cities and Towns, the Chamber, Abby's been very involved in this bill. It has a broad level of support, but sometimes these formal actions are very meaningful.
I had a, excuse me, thanks, Mr. Chair. I had a quick question. As I understand it, this is the third substitute, which I know that we've been supportive of. If we take a position today, will there be another substitute, do you anticipate, or some changes to it? Or are we basically supporting it as it exists today, right now, before substitutes?
It's a good question. I wouldn't anticipate any other substitutions that would be kind of far-reaching. The substitute that came out clarified that communities that have bus rapid transit or rail would have to choose one more menu item in terms of before they would be eligible for state funding, either through the Transportation Investment Fund or the Transit Transportation Investment Fund, the TIF or the TTIF. And I think generally that's a positive thing. There are still 22 or 23 options that local communities can take. So that was the main change, I think, with this last sub. So there's sort of the conceptual approval. There may be, again, some more technical changes that are made, but I wouldn't, even if there were a fourth sub that fixed something or an amendment, I wouldn't imagine, unless if it was substantive, perhaps the board would take additional action or clarifying action, but I wouldn't anticipate that to happen.
Thanks, Matt.
Let me just ask the question, would anybody object to us supporting House Bill 34?
I certainly wouldn't. I think it's a great bill.
I would strongly support it, given the component that you highlighted, Matt, in the sense that if there is a transit option that the cities can connect to, it does have an additional requirement for them, 4 instead of 3. But I feel like we can be really excellent partners with our cities, and so I would strongly support that as well.
So, and I would concur. And so, Matt, to the degree we can convey that, we ought to do that. And maybe one of us will be up there and could help you do that, but certainly on our behalf if you wanted to do that.
Okay. Well, hopefully we can match up schedules with one of you this afternoon.
Okay, great. Appropriations.
Yeah, appropriations. So there are 4 appropriations that relate to UTA matters. And one of them is sponsored by Senator Harper. That's our mobility management, to develop a really comprehensive plan. We've talked about this one before. That was listed as a priority appropriation by the IGG Appropriations Committee last week, as well as some ongoing resources for technology component of that. And so Ryan Taylor and Christy Allen have been really helpful with that one. That's in a good place. With the Vineyard, new station at Vineyard, which money was appropriated last year, as you know, we have some technical issues that we stumbled across this summer that we've had to overcome. So we've worked with Representative Christofferson and many of our local partners, including MAG and Vineyard, to try and come up with some additional legislative funds that we could use with other resources to do some double tracking that's needed really to open that station. That was also listed as a priority by IGG last week. So that's in a good place. Point of the Mountain, typically studies don't fare as well in IGG. That one didn't either and wasn't a prioritized component. But there's oftentimes all of these things go back through executive appropriations. And so things get shuffled and the lists get adjusted as time goes forward. The other one really quickly, it now has a bill name. It's House Bill 353. This is Representative Briscoe's bill, and it doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, but the title is Reduction of Single Occupancy Vehicle Trips Pilot Program. And we're looking for a good acronym that he can use.
I thought that there was an acronym and you came up with all the words to go with it, but there's not.
No, I'm not that smart, but that one would, the state would take a role, and so essentially what it would do would underwrite. There's a few other components to it, but it would underwrite fares during and leading up to bad air quality days. So we would work with Department of Air Quality to find those triggers and get word out. And the state wants to have a role with helping to get people on public transportation. And so it's kind of a trial, and you know, they want to collect a lot of data and understand behavioral changes. And we've talked about this before about you know, how many days would something like this work where people actually fundamentally start to change their travel patterns. And so this would give us a chance to really study that and learn a lot more. So that's the other appropriation that's a part of this particular bill.
And has that been out to committee? Yeah.
That has been, I think there's one more meeting of the Natural Resources Appropriations Committee, and I need to track that one and see where it's at, because there's a bunch of them in that committee.
Amount 353, the pilot, let's call it that. That currently has still 17 days worth of air, or did that change in any way?
So the idea was that it has a $1.2 million appropriation number with it, and it was kind of based on the average number of red air days across the Wasatch Front. And I think we've got some negotiating room with that because there's some additional costs that we would have as an agency, either in providing additional service or having additional staff out, safety and security and those kinds of things. And there's an openness to figure out what the right number of days is and how to get the word out, for sure.
Matt, do you need anything else from us at this point? Or?
No, thank you. That's all I had.
Thanks for that update. Discussion item B is an update on the Vineyard Frontrunner Station and where they are in that process. And you have Mary DiLoretto and Gray Turner here with us.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning.
So just first a little background on the Vineyard Station. When we did the Frontrunner study back in 2007, the Frontrunner South, it was identified as a future station. At that time, there was less than 200 people living there, and it was projected that in 2020 it would grow to about 10,000. And now I just Googled it this morning, and there is an estimated 14,000 residents with 3,000 housing units either built or under construction. So the time has come for that station. So Gray's just going to give you a little update on where we are with that construction.
Good morning. As Mary said, Vineyard is growing. Every time we go down there, it seems like there's more and more construction going on. As was mentioned, last year there was a $4 million appropriation given from the legislature. That money, because of the legislative appropriation, went through UDOT, and so UDOT is taking the lead on that project. We've selected an architect and designer with CRSA and Lochner. We went through the RFP process through UDOT. They were selected as part of the project, not just the station itself, but it includes the station, as well as we needed a bus loading area and also a parking lot, a place for parking stalls. You can see on the aerial view, the picture there on the left is kind of a higher up of Vineyard that was taken a little while ago, and then it's a little bit closer up, that inset on the right of where the actual platform. As Mary mentioned, when we built Frontrunner South, we anticipated a station at this location. So we actually, if you were to zoom into that aerial photograph, you could see where the platform exactly is going to go. We've actually installed the footings for a new platform so that the tracks wouldn't need to be disrupted in the drilling or the placement of those. So we tried to plan ahead, and it's going forward.
Were those footings done as part of the original construction?
Correct. Yep. When Frontrunner South,
a lot of
that was
foresight there. Right?
Somebody knew what they were doing. So
yeah, no, that was smart,
Mr. Meyer. So this is one of the city has been actively engaged and involved in this area. They look to this area as their town center. And so they do have a developer who owns this entire piece, but he is under the regulations from the city as to how and how he can develop it. So this is kind of we've gone through several iterations with them. You can see the platform there at the top part of the screen and the kind of the light gray strip in that tan corridor. That's the light rail corridor. As part of that, there is a bus loop. It's really hard to see with those kind of a purple area there down to the left. One of the things that we did, because of the city center location and the amount of traffic that will be in here, one of the things that we proposed is to have a bus-only entrance into this place so that our buses can get in and out fairly quickly. And so that there's two red vertical lines. It's the vertical line that's in the middle of that development is where the BRT, we've made an area for BRT buses as well as regular buses to stop. Now you also see a triangular blue area, that is about approximately a little over 300 parking stalls. Vineyard was not too excited about a large parking lot like we have at American Fork or Orem, but realized the need to have something temporarily. So what we've got is about a 300 stall lot there, and as develop occurs, that will be replaced by a parking structure. There are actually a couple of parking structures. We've identified anywhere from 800 to 1,000 stalls that would be needed, and so as development occurs and is staged in multiple phases, that parking structure would come online to accommodate that. So this is kind of the build out scenario. You can see up at our platform, there is a small line that goes perpendicular across the tracks and at the very end of our platform. That is actually a pedestrian overpass. The property north is to your left on this, and so to the east of that, the wide open field is actually UVU's property, and they plan on doing a lot of expansion in that location, and so that would connect up commuter rail. There's also a future plan on the east side of our tracks. There's also some Union Pacific tracks through there, but on the east side of Union Pacific is where tracks would come down if it when it does come down, that it will be over there, and so it would be accommodated with that. Well, that's kind of the build out phase. This is so with CRSA on board, this is we've gone through several iterations and layouts with the city and with the architects of what the platform might look like. CRSA, I will back up, CRSA in Lochner, the architects and the engineers that we have on board now are actually the ones that designed Commuter Rail South, and they've designed every platform that we've got along our commuter rail system. So they're very well aware of the needs that we have and the amenities that need to be placed. So looking at this concept, they took kind of that modern industrial look. They used the Timpanogos Harley station down there in American Fork as kind of something to look at, with kind of the large weathering steel type of look, as well as combine that with kind of the modern digital technology. So still in process, but that's an idea of what the platform might look like.
Ray, how effective are, I like the look, but how effective are those roofs keeping you dry if you're on a platform and it's...
Yeah, well, that depends on how bad the wind's blowing, I guess, down there. So,
yeah.
That was one of, that's obviously one of our concerns. That's one of our biggest comments that we received from the public, as well as that was one of Vineyard's biggest things. They wanted, they wanted more coverage. Everybody wants to have more coverage. And so that was one of our questions as well. And so they're going back and kind of reviewing that. Typically our shelters have some coverage, but they're smaller. They don't span as much. These, I think, span a little bit farther, but like say they're open to provide that light coming in. They do have the wind screens that are there, which helps a lot when the wind is blowing. People can pick a side and where the wind's not blowing. So,
well, I was thinking if they were not fixed louvers, you could close them, but clearly I was not reading that.
We could find a button that we could push and have them rotate, closed or open. So, well.
Thanks.
So since we are receiving that, as Mary mentioned, we had the positive train control that has been going on over the last several years. The positive train control has required a lot of modeling that's happened, as well as we completed the future frontrunner study last summer. What came out of that is that identified several double tracking sections. This was the top of the list as far as the place that needed double tracking the most. What we found is that that section between Orem and Lehigh is kind of our biggest, not our biggest problem, but one of our, if something goes wrong, it sends ripple effects through the entire system. And so that's one of our tightest areas. Working with our operations people, as you saw in the original aerial photograph, there is a current double track. Right now, the northbound train stops and waits there for the southbound train to come and to pass. If we were to put a station there, then they would need to dwell there even longer, and it would create a lot of delays through the system that would never be able to recover from. And so by double tracking approximately 2 miles to the north will allow the northbound train to pull into the station, stop, load, offload, and then proceed north and have those trains pass and not have to wait till the station. And that will allow the system to run on the frequency that it needs to. Our operations people tell me that it really is not possible to even open up that station without that double track because of the delays that it'll send throughout the system. So we need to double track. You can see there's a pretty high scale map of what it would, where it would need. On the left hand side, you see the light blue. That's the location of the Vineyard Station. There is a gap because of that double track already exists, and then it comes together. So we take out that switch, and actually leave the switch in, but double track to the north. We actually end up stopping it just short. You see on the very right hand side, that's the Timpanogos treatment plant, and there was a reason, and Steve can probably attest to that, of why we didn't acquire right-of-way through there. It's going to be an expensive little piece to get through there. We actually own the right-of-way along here that we can double track without acquiring additional right-of-way. There will need to be some temporary construction easements and things like that that happen during construction, but that saves us some money. But we stopped the double track just short of that Timpanogos water treatment facility, so that we don't have to get into the relocating sewer ponds and sewer lines and things like that. And then finally, this is...
Does that section, though, still provide you what you need? I mean, I'm assuming that you folks feel very comfortable with that.
Yep, the original designers, as great as they are, accommodated that original cross-section for the tracks. And so we can go in and we can put in the track. The double track section would be to the west toward the lake. But as I mentioned, we do have the right-of-way there, so all of the ballast and things can be contained within that. There are a couple of small walls and a couple of culvert extensions that would need to be put in with that, but that's fairly basic standard.
That's great
stuff. There is some environmental that will need to get cleared. Our favorite Ute Lady Truss plant will need to be observed, and we'll need to get environmental clearance on that before any work proceeds. So
excuse me, just to ask a quick question, and just to kind of reiterate this for maybe people who don't understand the double tracking. This is just basically going to allow our north or our southbound train to pull over and still allow traffic, which would thus keep us on similar schedules and not lose time as a result of having to stop the train that's going. Is that correct?
Yeah, what'll happen right now at that blue mark where the station is proposed to be right now, the northbound train stops and waits for the southbound to pass. This will allow them to pull into the station, stop, and then continue on. And then that passing motion will occur within that yellow line, about 1.5 miles or so to the north. So yeah, he can make his normal stop and go, and the train dwells at a station for what I think 30 seconds, but it will allow him to be able to make that stop. Right now he might have to stop and wait there for upwards of 2 to 3 minutes waiting for that southbound train to allow them to pull in and then continue on without slowing the rest of them down. And then the final slide is some anticipated costs, and this always causes people to joke a little bit, but it is expensive. It is an estimate. We had several engineers take a look at it. Involved with that is the preliminary engineering that's involved, as I mentioned right away, all the other categories. CE stands for the construction engineering and construction oversight that would be needed during the construction time. So
I see the UDOT oversight, which I understand is our numbers in there somewhere? Or, I mean,
yeah, our
numbers.
Things? Yeah, that UDOT oversight, the 3% is part of our cost, part of UDOT costs,
okay,
as well as the construction engineering part of it. Okay. The inspections will, cover our people going out there and monitoring that, as well as other third parties that we need to hire as far as testing agencies and things like that.
So we would go through whoever the UDOT is using for their contractor, I guess.
Currently, right now, to design the double track, because of Lochner. Matter of fact, I have a meeting in about an hour down in Vineyard to go through their contract. We're just going to modify the contract that they have right now. It makes sense to have the same designer. They have the capabilities to, the ones that are designing the platform also design the double track. And the intention would be that when that design is done, then we advertise for construction for the double track and the station to be done by one contractor all at the same time.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Well, I think this will be a great project. We obviously have a gap to close on the rest of the money, but I think it'll be extremely valuable in that section of our service area. But yeah, please.
I did think of a quick question, and I wanted to kind of know where we were at on the actual Vineyard Station platform construction. Will this, because you have 2020 on here as a proposed, completion or an estimated start date, will that coincide, or will the platform take longer? Where does that kind of stand?
So what will happen right now, currently the design of the platform is at about probably a 70 to 80% complete, the design will be. We'll finish the design on that, and the design of that will basically sit and wait for the design of the double track to catch up. The anticipated schedule right now is to have the design complete in about October of this year of 2019. Once the design is complete, then we can, and we receive the environmental clearance, then we can bid it out. And the November, December timeframe is that's probably the best time to bid a project like this. We would allow the contractor to start as soon as he wants to, early 2020. The anticipated construction time, they should be able to do this within one construction season. So if they got out there into late February or beginning of March, basically a year from now, they should be able to have that complete by, the September, October timeframe, and in time for us to be up and running as far as the December change day in 2020. So I don't think that, Vineyard, we were pushing if it was just going to be the platform that we could have that open by summer of next year, but because of the double track, it's going to be delayed about 6 months for us to design and build the track as well.
Okay.
You mentioned the property that is owned by UVU. I don't know if you have seen the intended plan for the UVU build out there.
I have.
But I have seen it as well when I was working at UVU, and the design is to have almost as many square feet in academic buildings and other facilities there in Vineyard as they currently have in Orem.
Correct. And I believe all their athletic facilities are going to
all of their athletic facilities would be there, and they would move all of that out there. They would make a large park and ride parking lot where students could drive to Vineyard, get on the front runner, go down to Orem, and then walk across the street on that ped bridge that's being built across the freeway. Because most of the parking area in the current Orem facility is to be built out in buildings, because the eventual size of the university is expected to be 65,000 students.
Yep.
And they're at about 40 to 45 now. So a 50% increase, and they're thinking that this Vineyard Station will actually be a transit point for many of the students between the two campuses. And so that's their kind of long-range goal. So we may say that UVU's got some property there. They also have some really interesting design and intention for that property.
Yep. Yeah, it'll be exciting, and UVU has been a great partner with UTA, with UVX, obviously. I'm working with them and UDOT on the pedestrian bridge right now as well. So,
I was involved in that pedestrian bridge from the UDOT side a couple of years ago. I happened to run into President Jimenez up at the state capitol last week. And the first thing she asked me was, what are you doing for Vineyard? That's an important part of what we're trying to get done. So gratefully, I was able to suggest to her that we were making presentations that day to appropriations for the double tracking that would facilitate getting this whole operation done.
Yeah. And one thing that people overlook as well with, just the station, but also is the bus service that's going to go in there.
Yes.
We've even accommodated a BRT, so, there's additional phases of BRT can pick up people along the way and take them to that front runner station, and they can get to school or wherever they're going to. So
yeah, either north or south from there.
Exactly.
Thank you. I think this is a great design, and we certainly need it.
Thanks. Any other questions?
Steve, did you have something?
Yeah, just should acknowledge that the BRT component could be a big one. There could be a potential east-west route that uses that overpass and comes on in. Could be an extension of UVX that could come here, because you think of some of our frequencies on front runner, midday being hourly, evening being hourly. It's not going to be conducive to students making those moves between those campuses. So we need to think of the other modes as well. That's a very good point. And additionally, that pedestrian overpass is not going to be an insignificant structure as well. Not to the extent that we're seeing at the freeway and the Orem, but still, a significant expense and something we need to be working with UVU and Vineyard sooner rather than later on.
Good. Well, thank you for that update. And thanks for your work to get us some preliminary numbers. I think that concludes our business. Our next meeting is the 27th of February. I'm going to be out of town, but we'll call in and ask Beth if she'll chair that meeting on my behalf. Is there any other business? If not, we'll stand adjourned.
Don't we have to call to motion?
Oh, I guess I have to call a motion. So Beth,
move for adjournment. Move to recognize that gavel.
Yeah, there we go.
I will second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I guess we're adjourned.